It's time for an October wrap-up. I can't believe I'm already saying that. I feel like it was only last week that I was filming my September one, but there we are. So, first thing I'm going to do is talk about some of the books that I mentioned in my Black History Month video, because I did try to prioritise some of those. The first one I'll mention is Cherish Farrell, which I did mention in that Black History Month video, so I read that in October. That's gone back to the library. I did really like that. I like Bethany Morrow's writing, essentially. I'm not sure if I loved that book. Equally, I don't think I absolutely loved the first book of hers that I read that prompted me to, but there's something in her writing that makes me want to keep trying her, and I think whenever I see a book by her, I will want to read it because her writing is so good. But I'm just not sure whether that was 100% the book for me. I think too much of it was YA protagonist with a very self-centered viewpoint, and I find those sorts of characters really difficult to read. I'm not suggesting that my characters need to be angels. I really hate it when we have like this angel type character that can do no wrong or has pure intentions all the time, but equally there is a point at which self-centeredness becomes very irritating to me. But anyway, so that was Cherish Farrell. I then read listened to all of the Black Stars short stories. I'll tell you the full list of them. We've got The Visit by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. We've got Clapback by Nalo Tompkinson. These Alien Skies by C.T. Witsi. The Black Pages by Nnedi Okorafor. We Travel the Spaceways by Victor Lavelle, and 2043 A Merman I Should Turn to Be by Nissi Shawl. I DNF'd one of these, and that was 2043 A Merman I Should Turn to Be. The reason I DNF'd was because for a short story, I found it too sci-fi. I think when you're going to start really messing with how the world works and really trying to expect your readers to... Sorry for that plane. Really trying to expect your readers to understand complex new societies and complex new ways that science has taken us. So in this one, we're looking at how bodies are being changed quite dramatically. So that's hence the name Merman. People are being fitted with gills and all sorts. I found in the short story context, I couldn't keep up. I couldn't work out what was going on. Maybe if I had read it on the Kindle, because this is an Amazon original, so only available on Audible or Kindle. Maybe if I'd read it like physically like that, then I might have kept up with it better. But on audio, it just really didn't work for me, so I ended up DNFing that one. But I did finish all of the other ones. My absolute favourite was The Visit by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I have... Where did I put it? Why can't I find that now? Oh, it's over there. Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I've pulled it out off my shelves because I really want to read that now that I've read this short story. I think she's amazing. I think what she did was subtle but so powerful. But funnily enough, like the least sci-fi of all the books on this list, it was the one I enjoyed the most. Essentially what she'd done was she'd reversed patriarchal society to make it a matriarchal society, but everything remained the same. So it was easy to follow because everything was as we know it. It was just basically gender flipping. So all the men were in positions of oppression, controlled by the women in the society. And that was just so powerful in showing how absurd it is, the way that we live, like the way that women are treated. It shows how absurd it is when you put it into that context. Postman. So The Visit by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie was my favourite one. The others I felt sort of so-so about. They were fine stories, but I don't, nothing to scream about, other than 2043, as I say, which I DNF'd. So then we have two books that I'm in the middle of. How Long Till Black Futures Month by N.K. Jemisin, which is a collection of short stories which are fine. I'm quite enjoying them, but I have decided to put the short story collection down for a moment and move on to something else for a bit. But I really enjoyed the introduction by N.K. Jemisin, which talked about how many of the things in these short stories were proof of concept. And so a big thing that she's fascinated by is this idea of locations as living beings or as living things, which I believe she uses in both the 5th season that starts the trilogy, the 5th season trilogy, and The City We Became, both of which I have on my shelf to read. So yeah, we see a short story in there which really seems to be an early version of The City We Became. Yeah, so I'm enjoying it, but I've decided to put it down. And the other one I'm halfway through is All Hail the Dark Lioness by Zanele Muholi. The photography in here is amazing. Absolutely amazing. But what it's interspersed with is little writings which are from, I believe, people who've been to see the exhibitions of the work and have sort of responded to it. So some of it's done in the form of poetry, some of it is almost like essays, some of it is thought pieces, and some of it really works. One of them that I wanted to share with you is based on this piece here. Now, I don't know how well you can see this on the camera, but this is one that you have to look at for quite a moment, because there's the tonality of it is quite almost flat. It takes you a moment to realise that Zanele is actually laying in amongst the rocks. And somebody has stood and looked at this and really thought about how it made them feel. And I don't mind people writing about how things make them feel, because that's a personal opinion. I have a problem with people who start to make these sweeping statements about what a piece means. But some of the stuff in this particular opinion piece that was done, I'll just read out to you because I did really love it. You have to look closely and look again to see more than the beach, to find Zanele amid the stones. Is she resting there on the rocks? Has her androgynous body been washed ashore, as so many black and brown bodies meet stony European beaches? Bloated and unconsenting, ebbing and flowing throughout history and news channels and nightmares and inherited memories of bodies that look like ours, looking like this? Has it been cast aside, following the murderous pilgrimage against black lesbians in South Africa, battered and abandoned in fields and on the sides of streets? Has it descended there from another dimension, planet, timeline, solar system? Did it drag itself from the waves to meet terrestrial land-bound life, as in Nnedi Okorafor's lagoon, onto the shores of Mayotte, surrounded by one of the world's largest and deepest lagoons, and home to the dugong, which inspired the myth of the first mermaid? Is it merely making acquaintance with the pebble upon which it rests, hearing of how they used to be mountains, of the violence they have witnessed, of the corrosion that has scarred them and moved them and made them beautiful, of the stillness? The stark contrast between her skin and the rocks heightens Zanele's otherness from us and her affinity with her surroundings. Reflective flesh seems but a temporary formation of oil, as though the earth has made of her a mouth in our image of extraction, and now attempts to say enough in a language humans might finally understand. Yeah, so I really loved that piece because that was really someone exploring what this image made them feel. Whereas at the beginning, we have some people who almost become incomprehensible in their attempts to be clever. Anyway, yeah, so I do just find that some people who write or talk about art can become really pretentious, and I really find that off-putting, and I know a lot of people find that off-putting. It's not just me, but yeah, there are some really good ones in there, and as I say, the photography is amazing. So which of the library books have I finished? You may have seen recently that I finished my Booker 2018 reading vlog, so that meant I finished The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner and Everything Under by Daisy Johnson this month. You can find out more about my opinions on those books in that video. My absolute favourite one that I read from the library this month was Temporary by Hilary Lecter. This was part of the Weird Woman's or Mad Woman's book club. It was their September pick, so I was a little late reading it, but I'm so glad that I got round to it. It was amazing. I really am not sure how to describe it, but essentially we have a character who is a temp, an agency temp, who goes into different workplaces and carries out the role. I'm sure this is a thing that's common across the world, like a temp. It starts out feeling quite normal. The sorts of roles that are being performed seem quite normal, and it very quickly descends into absurdity. She fills in for the CEO of a company and she's making decisions on behalf of the CEO. She ends up on a pirate ship that's supposed to be a startup business, and she's filling in, working with the HR team, and they're going out to secure adventure capital, and it is just so absurd, but it is such a commentary on so many things in the way we live, and how things that we just accept as normal. And I just loved it. I need to own a copy of this. I've added it to my wish list because it was superb, and I have recommended it to so many people because I just loved it so much. I mean, one that crosses both library and Black History Month. I finished The Trees by Percival Everett this month. I loved that. Do I love it more than Trust or Case Study? Yes, I think I did. I think I did love it more than those. On the back it says something like, in the vein of South Park, and yes, it felt like a literary novel that was like South Park. The way that the characters' name are parodies, the way that everything that happens is absurd, and yet so reflective of reality, so rooted in calling out how ridiculous people are, how ridiculous the world is. Just felt very South Park, and I really loved it. I've heard some criticisms over how people are described. I know somebody has said that they felt it was really fat-phobic. I didn't notice it myself. I do normally pick up on these things, but I felt that regardless of whether the characters were good or bad characters, they could have been fat or they could have been slim. No one was particularly that good. I mean, yes, we had like the better cops, but everyone was being parodied, everyone was being made fun of, but skewed towards saying how absurd things like lynchings were in history, the fear that white people had over black people, and of course Asian people, and the way in which Asian people were getting confused in the book. So someone was like, oh, it's the Japs when we're talking about Chinese people, and then someone mentions it and they're like, isn't that the same thing? It is all just being called out, and it is all being drawn attention to. So yeah, there may have been like offensive things, but the writing was almost so simple. There wasn't like a lot of depth in terms of descriptions of places, or that much description over how people looked or anything like that. Everything was very simple. The chapters could be as short as a paragraph long, and I think the maximum chapter length was 3 or 4 pages. Like, it was really simply written and yet so excellently done. Loved that one. And so the other one that I started from the library, because I've been wanting to get into poetry, I started a book called An Introduction to English Poetry, which I borrowed from my university library. It's not to do with my course. I just wanted to have a go at reading about poetry, because I've started reading poetry, but I don't really understand what I'm doing. So I wanted a book that sort of explained poetry to me. And this one was a very short one that I hope would just be like as it says, an introduction to poetry. But actually it was not, I think it was not what I was looking for. It was not about how to enjoy poetry as looking at how poetry works. So these ideas of things like iambic pentameters and all these words that I don't even remember that sounded made up. And I ended up DNFing that and just taking it back because I was like, I don't really care, actually. So if you have any recommendations for someone who wants to start thinking about poetry, but thinking about enjoying it and not necessarily thinking about how poetry is structured, please let me know. I would really appreciate it. I really want to understand why I like certain poetry and not other poetry. Maybe even how to enjoy poetry that I previously haven't enjoyed. Yeah. So if you've got any recommendations for me, please let me know. What am I currently reading? So I'm still working through Atonement. I'm waiting for my friend to catch up to the point that we've agreed on. So I've read 3/4 of the book. I've got a final quarter left. I'm waiting for her to finish her third quarter so that we can then move on. So Atonement by Ian McEwan is still currently being read. I've just started, so I don't have enough to say about it, but I've just started After Sappho by Selby Wynne Schwartz for my Booker Prize 2022 reading vlogs, which I'm going to do together with The Trees. I'll talk more about The Trees in that, and I'll dive into After Sappho. But then let's look at some of the books that I'm reading for university, because obviously that's really making up the bulk of my reading. So I'm reading various articles, various things, but some of the key texts, so I mentioned these in my like little library haul when I started, the Cultural Theory and Popular Culture Reader and the Introduction. These are proving to be incredibly useful. I wouldn't say that one of our modules is based off of this, but there does seem to be a chapter of this that is helpful for basically each week that we've learned. So you can see my bookmark. I'm about almost halfway through the introduction. And then, so the introduction gives you an overview of the different topics, and then the reader has some of the key texts that this references. So for instance, where we're talking about Marxism, there are some key texts like from Marx himself, from Engels. There's Raymond Williams texts that are referenced that are then actually brought out in here. Equally Roland Barthes, but I have, because I like Roland Barthes anyway, because of his crossover into photography, I am reading Mythologies as well. We've been using that this week actually, looking at some of what he's doing in this around semiotics. So this week we're learning semiotics, and so I'm about to read, literally after I finish filming, I'm going to read the chapter that's called Structuralism and Post-Structuralism, because we are looking at structuralism this week and post-structuralism next week. So yeah, these two are proving to be, I mean, this is why I bought them for myself, is because I could see that they would be useful, and they are. A book that I already had on my shelf, but which I'm starting now to use, is Beginning Theory by Peter Barry. This is an introduction to literary and cultural theory. So again, it's another viewpoint on many of the things that I'm learning in this for that particular module called Key Concepts, but this often takes a literary standpoint, so it'll explain things in terms of literature, which I do find really helpful actually. Other books that we've been reading this month, some Terry Eagleton. So there's one called Culture and one called Ideology. Obviously I haven't read the whole books, but I've been drawing on some of the chapters in those, because Terry Eagleton seems to be quite a key individual for what we're learning. And then I've taken a look at the Dialectic of Enlightenment by Adorno and Horkheimer, because we've been learning about the Frankfurt School. So I have also been reading a very short introduction to critical theory. I've taken a look at Benjamin Walter's The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. And then a book that I've just added to my shelves because it's proving to be really useful and I'm using it a lot on the internet, is An Introduction to Theories of Culture by Dominic Strinati. The other reason I've decided to add this to my shelf is because many of the modules that I'm looking to take next year when I go into the undergraduate degree are around culture and theories of culture. So yeah, that's why I thought this one would be handy to have my own copy of, so that I can keep referring back to it. I think that's everything. That was quite chaotic. I've decided for November to take part in Non-Fiction November by a Book Olive, so expect a video out on the books that I would like to read for that. Hopefully this month we will actually finish Atonement by Ian McEwan, because I have been reading that for 2 months now. And I'm hoping to have finished After Sappho. I am also beginning a reading vlog for Wolf Hall, the full trilogy by Hilary Mantel, because that whole series either won Booker prizes or was longlisted or shortlisted. So the first 2 books in that series were winners, and then the third one was shortlisted. I think it was shortlisted. So I've started reading those. Yeah, so there's quite a lot going on. The other thing I'm really hoping to do is, this month I finished my Booker Prize 2018 reading vlog, and when I first read Sabrina by Nick Drenaso, I mean that was back in September or even August that I read Sabrina. Originally I was a bit like, no, I'm still not convinced on graphic novels, but then the more time that passed and the more books that I read from that year's Booker Prize, the more Sabrina stuck with me and the more I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it's made me wonder whether actually let's like take this further, let's push this, let's see what's going to happen. So I know I literally said in last week's video that I wouldn't be putting any more reservations in at the library, but I've ordered 3 graphic novels from the library. I've ordered 3 graphic novels from the library, and I know that a couple of the ones that I'm interested in are available in my university library. All I've got to do is just go and pick them up whenever I'm ready, so I'm not even going to order them, I'm just going to pick them up when I'm ready to read them. So yeah, I'm going to be doing a bit of trying out some graphic novels, and then the final thing that I really want to do is, after having done the Black History Month video and realising quite how many books were on my shelves, I did prioritise some of the stuff for this month, but I want to make sure each month that I am reading something. So a little bit of a teaser for the non-fiction November. This is one of the books that I've picked up that I want to read, which is Bessie Smith by Jackie Kay. Now, the way it's described is, it's a remarkable book which mixes biography, fiction, poetry and prose to create an enthralling account of an extraordinary life. So this was on my Black History Month TBR, but I decided to incorporate it in my non-fiction November month. And each month I'm going to try and pick up a different book from that TBR that I mentioned for Black History Month, and throughout the next year, and then hopefully next year when I do next year's version of the Black History Month video, I'll be able to talk about all the books that I've read through the year from my previous TBR. So many words. Are they in the right order? I don't know. So I'm hoping to get to this one this month as well. And then of course the library books. So I've kind of started, but I didn't really want to mention it, but I've just started Our Wives Under the Sea by Julie? Oh, I suddenly can't remember her name. It's in my university bag because I read it on the bus. So I'm reading Our Wives Under the Sea, even though that was one of the most recent ones that came in from my library reservations. But it is also one of the most popular books that I have, so I want to get through it quickly because I have a feeling someone else is going to have requested it and I won't be able to renew. Same goes for these two, Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors and Pure Colour by Sheila Heti. Because these took so long to come in on my reservations, I have no doubt that someone's requested it after me, so I'm going to try and prioritise those ones and get them read. And then I'll move on to the ones that people don't seem to be requesting so much. Anyway, that was quite a long-winded video to wrap up October. I'm becoming quite chaotic with these. Maybe November's wrap-up will be